Good morning, and welcome to your morning cereal. Good news! Overnight, the Earth finished another full rotation over the last 24 hours, so good news, you're waking up to a Tuesday. Now, once you're up and going today, you're going to want to grab a lawn chair, call into work, and sit by your mailbox for a couple hours. Why? Because today is National Thank a Mailman Day. Thanks for bringing me all my bills and all that junk mail. Luckily, in some parts of the U.S., we're experiencing warmer than usual weather, so that'll prove to be a nicer time outside. But if it's cold where you are, take comfort in the fact that today is also National Homemade Soup Day and Sweater Day, which are great for a good old-fashioned winter day. Okay, let's jump into today's episode with today's quotes. One fun, nostalgic quote, and then a second quote to tease our book review later in the episode. Hopefully, one of these quotes will speak to you and jumpstart your day in a positive direction. All right, our first quote is from Australian singer and songwriter Natalie Imbruglia. You remember her from her song Torn way back in 1997? Well, she said, "Enjoy every moment. You never know when things might change," end quote. Now, I sense a slightly pessimistic tone in that, but I agree. We have to take the time to make a real effort to stay in the moment or become present in those everyday moments in life and enjoy them. Okay, today's teaser quote from the book review is, "Such is the power, the stupendous power of sincere, heartfelt appreciation." Now, as usual, we'll unpack that here in just a few minutes during the book review segment. But first, let's jump into our usual dose of fun and historic facts from this day in history. We're going to start back in 1789 when George Washington was elected to serve as the first U.S. president by a unanimous vote in the first electoral college. Then in 1859, one of the oldest known copies of the Bible, the Sinai Bible, a handwritten copy of the Greek Bible, was discovered in Egypt. Then in 1897, and close to my heart, Alfred Crail. He patented the first ice cream scoop. Then skipping up to 1913, that's the year Rosa Parks was born in Tuskegee, Alabama. That same year, in 1913, the Grand Central Terminal opened up in New York City. Then in 1932, the United States hosted its first Winter Olympic Games, and they held it at Lake Placid in New York. And on this day in 1945, during the final stages of World War II, the Yalta Conference opened with Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin meeting to plan the final defeat and occupation of Nazi Germany. Then skipping all the way up to 2003, that's the year when Yugoslavia officially changed its name to Serbia and Montenegro. And then finally, on this day in 2004, some kid at Harvard, he launched the Facebook. I think I'll stick with my MySpace page. And happy birthday to you if today is your birthday. You share a birthday with quite a few people. American boxer Oscar De La Hoya, he's 52. Lawrence Taylor of the NFL, he's 66. Dan Quayle, you remember that name. He was the VP in the United States under George H.W. Bush. He's going to be 78 today. Alice in Chains frontman Alice Cooper, he's 77. Then country singer Clint Black, he's 62. And as we mentioned earlier, Natalie Imbruglia, she turns 50 today. And the number one song on this date in 1989 was When I'm With You by Sheriff. This is one of those quintessential 80s songs, and interestingly, it holds the Guinness World Records for the longest held vocal note in a U.S. hit single. It's the last word of the song, and the lead singer held the note for 19.3 seconds. So if you're like my family, or if you prefer next time you're alone in the car, crank this song up and see if you can match and hold the note. It's pretty impressive. And if you're scrolling in your mind to find the iconic MTV music video for this song, well, it's one of the few number one hits during the MTV era that didn't have a music video. And the number one movie on this date in 1993 was Disney's animated film Aladdin. Aladdin had high hopes following the original animated Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, with Beauty and the Beast being the first animated movie ever to gross over $100 million. Well, partly in thanks to Robin Williams' role as the genie, Aladdin grossed $217 million at the U.S. box office and $504 million worldwide, and it was the most successful Disney movie until the release of Lion King. The movie went on to win many awards, and the song A Whole New World is the only Disney song to win a Grammy for the Song of the Year, and the only song to hit number 1 on the Billboard Top 100. Not even the song Let It Go from Frozen hit that mark. Let It Go peaked out at number 5 on the charts. Okay, well, let's move on to some personal growth here in the book review segment of Morning Serial. This is where we take a few moments to reflect on lessons learned from the current book we're reading. And currently, we're reading through Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. As you know, it's a timeless book that is consistently on all the must-read lists, and it's packed with rock-solid advice and actions for us all to use and build healthy foundational concepts to live by. Yesterday, we began reading Chapter 6 of Part 2, which is entitled How to Make People Like You Instantly. And Carnegie began this chapter by telling a couple of stories about looking for something to discuss about the other person that made them feel important. And Carnegie reminded us that, quote, the desire to be important is the deepest urge in human nature, end quote. We ended yesterday's reading with Carnegie talking about how this philosophy has passed down through the ages by nearly every major philosophical leader, and he ended up with summing up quoting Jesus saying, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Now, it's hard to follow up a timeless philosophy that we've all used to teach our children, that most definitely still applies to us as adults, or at least it should. But Carnegie follows this up by saying, quote, you want the approval of those with whom you come in contact. You want recognition of your true worth. You want a feeling that you are important in your little world. You don't want to listen to cheap and sincere flattery, but you do crave sincere appreciation, end quote. And again, Carnegie reminds us of what Charles Schwab said of how we should act towards others. But it also applies to how we want our friends and associates to treat us by being, quote, hearty in their approval and lavish in their praise, end quote. So the golden rule is still a real thing that Carnegie asks us to put into practice by treating others the way we want to be treated. And if you are asking the question of, how should I do this, or when should I do this, or where should I do this? Carnegie's answer, quote, all the time, everywhere, end quote. Here, Carnegie gives a short story about not needing to wait until you are in some high position of authority or an important committee of some sort, but you can use the magic and philosophy of appreciating others in everyday life. Also, Carnegie suggests that by using little phrases such as, I'm sorry to trouble you, would you be so kind as to, or would you please, or would you mind, and thank you. Carnegie says, quote, little courtesies like these oil the cogs of the monotonous grind of everyday life. And he continues, and incidentally, they are the hallmark of good breeding, end quote. True, and I hope my kids are listening. Okay, time for a Carnegie story to illustrate all this philosophy. Carnegie calls upon the story of Hall Caine. He was a very successful novelist in the early 20th century. He was the son of a blacksmith, and again, not much schooling for him. And I might add that there are a lot of examples of people reaching big success without much schooling. And spoiler alert, that is not one of Carnegie's principles ever in the book. Okay, back to the story. Caine grew up modestly, without much education, but he had a passion for poems and writing. And his favorite poet was a man named Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Well, young Caine, he sent an essay that he wrote to Rossetti singing his praises. And Carnegie imagined it, Rossetti was, quote, delighted, and any young man who has such an exalted opinion of my ability, speaking for Rossetti, must be brilliant, end quote. As such, Rossetti invited Caine to be his secretary. And this was a turning point in Caine's life because in his new position, he was constantly around many of the top literary artists of his time. Caine was able to learn from them and was inspired by their encouragement, which eventually led to the launchpad of his own career. When Caine passed away, Carnegie says he was the richest literary man of his time, and people came from far and wide to tour his home, the Greba Castle. It was on the Isle of Man. And Carnegie's point? Well, Carnegie says, quote, who knows, he, speaking of Caine, might have died poor and unknown had he not written an essay expressing his admiration for a famous man, end quote. And Carnegie continues, quote, such is the power, the stupendous power of sincere, heartfelt appreciation, end quote. Appreciation is so powerful because the poet Rosati considered himself important, which isn't odd, and he's not an outlier there. We all consider ourselves important, and sincere appreciation is food for the hungry. We just gobble it up. Tomorrow, we continue in Chapter 6, and Carnegie tells stories of tears and free cars and free puppies. It sounds like an Oprah Winfrey show, but you're going to want to join us for Carnegie's free advice and stories. Okay, I hope your week is off to a great start. And if you're facing a big project, a personal goal, or just another day on the grind, know that you've got this. Have the courage to just keep taking steps in the right direction. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Have a fantastic day. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Morning Serial podcast on the One Life Live It channel. You can find more episodes and videos by visiting our YouTube channel and the website at Sean Inglis and at SeanInglis.com, where you can also follow our other podcasts, the Mr. and Mrs. Inglis podcast and the Life Happens podcast. In these other podcasts, we'll dive deeper into everyday issues, self-improvement and well-being, business and finance, and we welcome special guests too. So join us. It'll be a good time, I promise. Thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow.